So now we're going to ask for the public education panelists to come forward and while they make their way to our panel. I'd like to give a shout out to Jen White-Martin. Jen's here. Jen, stand up. Jen, segging with the PHRC, you know, York County does have a social justice ambassador program, and the state has a social justice ambassador program. Jen's a member, I'm a member. If you want, you can apply. The more the merrier. Human Relations Commission, I think, has done outstanding work in the last couple of years. I'm sorry? Oh yeah, business cards over here. Please check out this program. It's free, it's interesting. I went to a program last week. I learned a lot about Latino and Hispanic rights. Please sync with the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, and also support your city Human Relations Commission here in the city of York. And yes, you are. Tell me you are. And Thaddeus Stevens now will kick off. Representative Thaddeus Stevens will kick off this pro-education panel, which will be moderated by Rich Askey, past president of PSEA. But first, we have this honorable guest, Thaddeus Stevens, the godfather, although he would hate that phrase, of public education. Okay, the savior. Representative Stevens, I know you're not familiar with microphones. Yes. And I want to thank our panelists, Dr. Sherry Washington, Laurie Lebo, Jimbo Land from Annville, Cleona, the great Mike Mounts from Central School District, and the beautiful lady that started the revolt against the book ban, Doma Rivera.
Just give me a second to sit up here. Yeah, being 233 years old makes me a little slower. So let's see here. Well, it's very nice to be back here in York. For you that are not familiar with me, I actually lived in York from 1814 to 1816 when I studied law and then got my bar certificate, and then I moved over to Gettysburg where I lived from 1816 to 1842, and then I moved over to Lancaster where I lived the rest of my life until 1868. Now, for people who are not familiar with me, let me give you a little bit of a summary of my important things. I was the most powerful congressman during and after the Civil War. I helped persuade Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. I was instrumental in the passage of the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery, as shown in the movie Lincoln, where I was ably portrayed by Tommy Lee Jones, but I did not have a Texas drawl. I am the father of the 14th Amendment, the single most important amendment to the Constitution, which requires equal treatment under the law and also extends the Bill of Rights to the state level, and by the way, is under attack at this time. I was one of the architects of Reconstruction, and I also spearheaded the impeachment of Andrew Johnson. Some people have called me the greatest unknown person in American history, or the 17th and a half president, because I led a veto-proof Congress against Andrew Johnson and prevented him from losing the Civil War after the Civil War. Now, with all that said, late in my life, I considered my greatest achievement as the savior of public education. And I'm just curious, maybe the esteemed representatives of the Pennsylvania Union know why I am that. Do you know why I am the savior of public education? Does anybody else in this crowd know why? Well, I will tell you. Public education came to Pennsylvania in 1834. We were one of the first states to actually enact public education. But as you all well know, with public education comes taxes. And people did not like taxes. So they actually started a taxpayer revolt, which went out and got legislators to pledge to repeal public education at the next legislative session in 1835. And sure enough, when the legislature met, the Pennsylvania Senate repealed public education, okay? Then it was the turn over in the House, where I had just been elected the year before. And everybody came over to hear me, even at that, with that limited experience. I had already established myself as a dynamic speaker, and I gave a speech which actually turned back the repeal effort. In fact, the House passed a law that was stronger, okay, a stronger public education bill, and then that went over to the Senate, which had just previously repealed public education, and they approved that. So it was quite a victory for me. And I would like to take the time to read a few excerpts from that. If you wish to acquire popularity, how often have you been admonished to build not your monuments of brass or marble, but make them of ever-living mind? Sir, talking to the legislature, I trust that when we come to act on this question, we shall all take lofty ground, look beyond the narrow space which now circumscribes our vision, beyond the passing, fleeting point of time on which we stand, and so cast our votes that the blessing of education shall be conferred on every son of Pennsylvania, shall be carried home to the poorest child of the poorest inhabitants of the meanest hut of your mountains, so that even he may be prepared to act well his part in this land of freemen and lay on earth a broad and solid foundation for that enduring knowledge which goes on increasing through increasing eternity. And that is what turned back the repeal effort. Now, I would also like to say that for people who want to know more about me, there is also a new museum about me over in Gettysburg called Thad's Place, okay? And we have here rack cards, I guess that's what you call them, up here if anybody afterwards wants to grab one of those. Now, I have to say that I have been honored for that being the savior of public education. And actually, I brought along a few little artifacts which involve this. This is one thing which was an envelope made up for the 100th anniversary of my speech, which was circulated back in 1935. Then I also have here, this is a little medal which seems to be just self-disintegrating in my midst. It was for the Pennsylvania Public School Centennial, which has like a little medal for me there. And even more recently, a student over in Chambersburg was very impressed with what I had done, and so she used her talents to come up with this doll of me. Unfortunately, she gave me a smile, which I never had. So, in any case, as you can imagine, because of all my very controversial positions that I took during my lifetime, I had a lot of, before I tell you the controversy, I have to tell you, because of my stance on public education and my victory, I considered that one of my greatest achievements, despite all the other great achievements I had. And in fact, I told people near my death that if I could have one student of the educational system of Pennsylvania shed a tear on my grave, I would be amply rewarded. So, but going on about my controversy, I was a very controversial person. And I remember one particular time, I'm walking down a narrow sidewalk in Lancaster, and a political enemy is coming towards me. And my political enemy stops and he scowls at me and he says, "I never stand aside for a skunk." And I stepped off the curb and I said, "But I always do." Okay. However, I did have a lot of admirers, and I particularly remember one time a woman came up to me and said, "Mr. Stevens, I'm such a great admirer of yours. Would you give me a lock of your hair?" And I said, "Oh, sure, have the whole thing." That was one of my distinctive qualities, is I wore a wig. So, but I also feel that I had the last word for everybody on my grave. And if you go to a small cemetery in Lancaster, you will see that last word. And my epitaph on my grave says, and I'm buried in a cemetery that was open to both whites and blacks at that time, which was very unusual. And my epitaph says, "I repose in this quiet and secluded spot, not from any natural preference for solitude, but finding other cemeteries limited as to race by charter rules, I have chosen this, that I might illustrate in my death the principles which I advocated through a long life, equality of man before his creator." So thank you very much for your attention.
Go into our conversation in just a few minutes, but we'll start off with Dr. Washington giving a little, I know some of you have just come in the door, so go ahead and reintroduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Sherry Washington. I am a retired educator. I stopped counting years. I do not work for York City School District, but I do partner with them in serving the young people in the city of York.
I'm Laurie Lebo, and I work for the Pennsylvania State Education Association, and we're the largest union in the state, which consequently means we are the largest advocate for public education in the state. I am an organizer, and I've been with PSEA for 14 years.
My name is Jimbo Lamb. I'm a high school math teacher in the Annville-Cleona School District in Lebanon County. I live in Harrisburg. I also serve as the president of the PSEA Southern Region, which encompasses 10 counties in south central Pennsylvania, representing over 18,000 teachers.
I'm Mike Mounts. I teach civics in south central Pennsylvania. I've also had a second job in political organizing in south central Pennsylvania in local, state, and federal elections. Since probably roughly 2010. I'm the founding chairman of Citizens for Central York School District, which popped up to oppose the book ban and elect the candidates who ultimately reversed that ban. And for the last 5-6 years, I've been on the chair, the PAC chair for Turn South Central PA Blue. We've flipped probably 20 municipal councils from red to blue in that time, and I'm a recovering workaholic.
I'm Delma Rivera Lytle, and I served as the diversity officer at Central York School District for almost 18 years. And I'm just a community advocate and do a lot of work with the Latino community.
And I'm Thaddeus Stevens.
All right, so I hope Thaddeus doesn't mind. I'm going to bring up another advocate for public education, this historical advocate for public education, and that's Horace Mann. He was also a 19th century advocate. He was very special to me because whenever anybody asked me, whether it was when I was teaching or representing PSEA, why was public education so important to me, it was from him that I pulled the reason that public education is so important. That public education is the great equalizer. And that gives everyone the upward movement, the opportunity to learn about others from different places, from different races, from different statuses. And that's, for me, was what the focus was and why I chose to advocate for public education. So the question is, first question is going to be, what is the ultimate purpose of public education? Is it to create responsible citizens or to prepare students for jobs and for economic outcomes? So, Sherry, why don't you take the first swing at it?
I think it's a hybrid of both. Public education is essential. When you look at the history of education, it was first, started for the elitism or folks who belong to a religious faith-based group who could afford. Public education. That's part of, I believe, of the formula.
But we'll just go right down the road. Other questions I'll move around depending upon, but let's go right down the road for this one.
I have to obviously agree with Dr. Washington here. Yes, it's a hybrid of both, but I think that what we're seeing now is with the attacks, these constant attacks on public education, we're starting to see the effects of not being able to prepare our kids, having an educated adults who can think critically, with the attacks on science, certainly, and the attacks on civil liberties and the attacks. I mean, there is such a price, there's a cost if we do not create an informed citizenry.
Yeah, and to carry on with that, I think it goes beyond the hybrid of those two things, because education to every person is going to mean something different. Last night, actually, I was at an event in Harrisburg, and one of my former students was there, so my wife and I go over and we talk with him for a little bit, and he works at this organization called Tech Centro, which actually works on helping to educate those that are underemployed and unemployed, and get the training that they need to actually move into the workforce and better their lives. And he's done a lot of great work there in this nonprofit organization, but as he was talking to my wife about things that I did for him when he was a student, he talked about how I gave him an opportunity that he never thought he could actually achieve when I helped coach him in track and field. So he's bringing up this story, and my wife was like, oh, he's going to talk about how you affected him in math, which is what I teach. But what we teach is one thing. It's the impact that educators make to everyone's life. And it's going to be different for every single person. So like if you were to think back about one of your favorite teachers, you're going to think not about a specific lesson, but something else that they did that made you want to go back to school that next day. That's one of those things about public education. It gives that safe space for people to go and have a place to belong, be who they're supposed to be, and know that they're going to be able to do something better than what they thought they could.
I think our job as educators is to teach students to be critical and independent thinkers. And incidentally, that may also be the biggest challenge we face today, right? I mean, we have a media landscape that just shouts partisan nonsense into its echo chamber, algorithms that then pump disinformation into what our students are scrolling through on social media. We have ubiquitous access to AI, which creates this temptation for students to outsource their critical thinking to a robot that's been programmed by a for-profit corporation. And it's in this environment that we're tasked with teaching students to be independent critical thinkers, so that they can have a healthy skepticism of large concentrations of power, both in the public and private sector, so that they can know when it's appropriate to push back against the abuses of those things, And so if we can teach students to do that, if we can teach students not just what to think, but how to think, we can ensure that they will be both responsible citizens and contributing members of tomorrow's economy.
Well, following everybody's, I agree with so much of this. And I also think it truly is a balance. And it is what situation we create in our schools also, because if our students are there, they can't get an education if they don't feel safe or they don't believe that they belong there. And I had a unique role in my position, not as a teacher, but in my role as the diversity officer, that I was one of many safe spaces that kids had at the school. And that was something that many of us gave to our students, and especially at Central, when we had all the divisiveness, they needed a safe place. And for me, it wasn't just about being with our Black or Latino students. It was about all of our students, or LGBTQ students, that felt safe. This is just a little story, but I think it's important that I had a gay pride flag in my office, and I had many students, Miss Delma, are you gay? I know why they were asking me,
Right.
because they saw the flag in my office, and I said, why are you asking? Well, you have this flag. And I said, well, do you know what an ally is? In all the years, I had one student that knew what an ally was. And so they need to know, whether it's their teacher, their principal, school board members, that they have allies within the school, and then all these other issues then come together.
Well, I agree with all of you. Okay. And I have to say that even though most of my public life was as a lawyer and a politician, I always look back fondly on my time as a teacher here in York. And in fact, occasionally in Congress, that occupation would come up. I remember one time a particular, I would say, irritant Southern congressman was kind of poking me and said, is it true that you were a teacher at one time? And I said, oh yes, I definitely was a teacher at one time. And I helped many a hopeful youth find a good life. I wish you had been one of them.
Okay, so next question is funding about public education, the importance of funding. You know, we all want our students to go to a school that nurtures love of learning and prepares them for the future. Sadly, many public schools are underfunded, and they continue to be underfunded, and they have been underfunded for decades. So, and that leaves systemic gaps that deny many students the opportunities that public education is supposed to promise them to have. So, instead of investing in our students, we have certain politicians that want to dramatically cut funding to our public schools. We see cuts coming from the federal government with the dismantling of the Department of Education. Pennsylvania receives millions of dollars from the Department of Education that it looks like we are in danger of now not receiving. So, and of course, here we are in Pennsylvania, we don't even have a budget yet, and it's October. So, and that also is affecting schools. They don't have the money. They have to borrow money, and then they have to pay interest on the money they borrow. So it's all cascading. So, let's talk a little bit about the threats to funding for public education, but also let's focus on how do they impact classroom resources and student opportunities. So, Jimbo, I'm going to let you start off with that one. All right. So, and excuse me for being my water bottle.
Funding is a huge thing that is facing so many school districts nowadays. I've been speaking about this quite a bit at a lot of different events where there are, people that are trying to take that money away for other purposes. And behind all of this is the idea of greed. You see that there are people who want to introduce vouchers, both to the state and nationwide, that takes money away from those in need and gives it to people who don't need it. That they always say that they're advocating to make sure that those with fewer opportunities get the opportunity to use that money to go somewhere else. But that voucher doesn't cover that whole cost of going somewhere. And then if they want to go to some place specific, that place also then has to say, okay, we'll take you. Public schools, we take everybody. And because we take everybody, we don't always get that same opportunity of funding for them as well. And you can see that disparity between school districts as you look across this Commonwealth. You'll see, like, if you compare Harrisburg and York to somewhere like Central Dauphin, even just right next door, even Central York, those funding values are very different because of the tax base. And there's actually a clause in the Pennsylvania Constitution that says that the legislature needs to fund public education. 2 years ago, there was a lawsuit that was decided that the state does not fairly fund public education. We saw 1 year of a huge increase in those areas that need that extra need of getting more of that funding. That's part of what the argument is right now as to why we don't have a budget, because there is a group of legislators who don't want to fund those schools because they're getting fed information from outside groups that want to make money off of the schools. If you look at standardized testing does have a place in our schools. It helps us understand what goes on there, but we have an over-reliance on it that actually then ends up saying, hey, there's going to be a group of students that are always going to be below basic and always going to be basic, because it takes forever for us to get these results back. The tests were given back in May. We won't get them back until next month, a whole quarter of the way through the school year. How are we supposed to use that data to actually make decisions to drive our students forward when we need to? Well, all that does is saying, hey, these are the groups of students who need remediation. And guess who has the remediation resources for us? The testing companies, but they cost money. It's all about greed and not giving our students and our schools what they need, and that's where we really need to make those changes.
2014, the NAACP, along with a public law firm, we filed a lawsuit with the Pennsylvania Department of Education. It took us 10 years. In 2024, we won. And the ruling was that Pennsylvania had been underfunding rural and urban districts significantly. And so then came forth the presentation of the 7-year funding gap. Fighting, whatever. Some funds did go out last year because of the crazy budget this year. We're still struggling. The vouchers, as you said, takes money out of public education. You give the ruling, then you talk about vouchers. What are we doing? You're still trying to take money out of the hand. So your rural and your urban schools do not have the resources because our tax formula, and I'm sorry, I'm a retired assistant superintendent, our tax formula is based on housing. And your house value in the city and in the rural parts are not the same as in your suburban parts. So you're not getting as much money. And one of the things Representative Carol Evans fought for when she was education chair was changing the formula. So in Georgia, they use proceeds from the lottery to fund the schools versus your taxes from your house to fund the schools. In Colorado, we're using funds from the dispensaries to fund the schools. As long as we keep this tax formula based on the value of our homes, that funding is never going to be equitable. So we got to change that formula. Last year, I had the pleasure of working with the National Economics Education Research Company, where we actually are putting forth legislation to eliminate standardized testing and move toward competency-based testing, raising teacher salaries to the minimum of $62,000 to start with, and then stop getting out of these relationships with those testing companies, because that's where a large portion of the money. He's being kind. I don't work for the school district anymore. I'm going to say it. There's multiple millions of money that goes into that standardized testing. And then you're in bed with the companies that give you the resource to do the remediation and close the gaps. That's ludicrous. Those resources could be better served by helping our young people and giving our teachers the salary they deserve. They're underfunded. Teachers don't work at 9 to 5. They're grading papers on the weekend. They're worried about their kids. But you have so many teachers coming in as a starting teachers, and I'm sorry, Rich, I'm gonna be quiet. No. They're coming in as a starting teacher, but they got a DoorDash in order to make ends meet, just to pay back the student loan they had to get, so they could become a teacher. It doesn't make sense. So we just have to do better, not just with the funding, but also leveraging to pay for our educators.
This system you're referring, right, where the amount of funding is indexed to the local property values, it it guarantees that the districts that need the money the most will get it the least. It is a recipe for systematic and systemic inequity. And it's a system that, by the way, as several have referenced, our Commonwealth Court has said is unconstitutional, but persists anyway. And meanwhile, we have, according to IRS data obtained by ProPublica, Elon Musk paying 3.25% on his multiple billions per year that he makes. We have Jeff Bezos paying less than 1%, literally 0.98% on an entire year's of earnings, 1 year of earnings. We have Warren Buffett, 0.1% on the billions. I'm not cherry picking data. If you look at the 25 richest people in the country, the IRS data, 3.4% that they paid. There is no shortage of places to find the money to fund public education. There's only a shortage of political will from our leaders to stand up and do what's right, because there's an unspoken or perhaps a privately spoken agreement that these people will pump money into the campaigns of the people running our system, and in exchange they will not be taxed. And the result, getting back to Rich's question, is that I have students from families that are already financially hard-pressed having to pay activity fees to play a sport, to join a club, or to be a member of an organization. I have bigger class sizes and less individualized attention. It's profoundly messed up. I was going to use a different word.
Can I make one more point?
Yes, and then.
So, yeah, but just quickly, the example of when you talk about the greed in the system, and I'm going to refer back to when Governor Corbett was in office, that the underfunding of our schools, they specifically really hit York City. How many people remember 2012 and what they were trying to do in York City? They basically essentially bankrupt the whole school district. And so what they could do then is swoop in and and fully charterize the school district. That was not, that was a feature, not a bug. They were trying to destroy the school district so they could sell it to the highest bidder, to fully charterize it, as I've said before. And you know what, by the way, how many people remember that our fight, we fought hard, the NAACP was involved in that, PSEA was heavily involved in that, the churches, the local churches were involved in that, and we were able to beat that back. However, the one thing I've learned is these people who are trying to take over our schools and trying to, they've never seen a tax dollar that they don't think belongs to them, and they've never seen a kid that they want to earn money off their backs.
Okay, so first of all, I'm going to start off by apologizing to the next panel. We got a very late start, and we're having a great conversation, and I plan on, we're going to move it along, but I plan on finishing the conversation. So, next is about parent involvement in schools. Right? It's a significant and important topic, and it's defined by legal rights, varying levels of engagement, ongoing debate over parent authority. So while research shows that parent involvement is extremely important to the success of a child in school, what does that involvement translate into when it comes to making decisions about the curriculum and other important decisions like that? What is the balance? So the question is, what is the appropriate balance between allowing parents to have a say in their child's education and ensuring that all students have access to a curriculum that is rigorous and inclusive? Anybody want to just dive in first here?
Man. All right, that's what we'll see. Okay. First of all, when we take our car to get service, we don't tell the mechanic how to service our car. When you're at a school and that's that teacher's domain, how do you tell a teacher how to teach in the classroom? That's perplexing for me. Teachers go to school because it's a balance of art and it's a balance of science. They are competent. They know what they're teaching. Should parents have a right on what's taught? If that's your choice, go to a private school or a parochial school. But in a public school, we're bound to provide a curriculum that adheres to the standards established by Pennsylvania Department of Education. All public schools have a curriculum that does that. For a parent to tell a teacher, or for the board to tell the teachers what book they can and cannot use is stepping over the boundary. It really is. And if you want your children to learn something special, then that's that parent's right to do so in their own domain. If a parent doesn't want their child to read a certain book, yes, there's policies involved where you can write a note or a sign off that says, I want my child excluded from watching that movie or reading that book. But to give that power over to the parent would be equivalent to you walking into that automobile industry and telling the guy how to balance your tires and you don't even know what a lug wrench is.
And what you're asking for is not just the ability to tell the mechanic how to service their car. They want to tell the mechanic how to service everyone else's car. I actually think the answer is pretty simple. You got a right to have a say in your own kid's education. You don't have a right to have a say in mine or anyone else's. And that's exactly what these ideologically motivated interest groups that are masquerading as concerned parents are demanding. They're demanding to carve a window in a bathroom just to make sure there's maybe no gay kids in there in Southwestern. They're demanding to ban books about, to ban books about black or gay people, or anyone who doesn't look like them, act like them, think like them. That's not acceptable, and we need to have school board members and school administrators with the backbone, the courage, and the moral clarity to stand up and say no.
And I think also it's many of these parents not understanding, as what Lord Washington said about how is a curriculum made. All of the book ban at Central started because all we did as, in my position, we were asked for resources while the school was shut down during COVID, and when the students returned, the teachers wanted resources so that they knew how to address some of the questions, some of the issues that might have come up. Then they started saying that I and other teachers were trying to take this into our own hands, making our own curriculum, which was not the case. It was a resource. And that's where all of this came from. And it was parents demanding to be, as a parent myself, I wanted to be involved in my daughter's education at Dallastown, but there was also a process by which to do it. And this might sound very simple, but I also believe there's a way to do things, and a way to do things with kindness and understanding. And if you don't understand something, go to a school board meeting, meet with the department heads that are developing the curriculum. That if we would have this better communication and not have all these extreme groups that would, when we would walk into Central, okay, when this came up with the curriculum, you could cut the tension in our school, a school district that was so bonded, and that's not a way for any school district to run when you have administration against the school board, against the teachers, and then the students feel this too. So, I think are we taking questions?
We're going to hold questions till...
It's not a question, it's a directly related comment. I had a particular literature class in high school, and I went to high school in Michigan. I'm old enough, I can tell you, it was the early 1980s. And one of the novels I dealt with is Huckleberry Finn. I also dealt with 1984 and Tom Sawyer, which are now banned books. My parents didn't blink at my teachers having me do this. I cannot comprehend what on great green earth is making these people get their undies in such a bunch. It's part of helping our young people be able to look at things from a different angle and prepare them to participate in the world around them. Good heavens, I wish these parents that want to micromanage what you're doing with their young people would pull their heads out of their hindies, grow up, and get on with it and let you do your jobs.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to go right into the next. I'm going to go right into the next question, and it basically, Delma, I think you're the person to start off answering it, and it's how do demands for book bans and censorship affect like school libraries and our students and teachers? What was when you were going through everything you were going through?
I believe that the book ban at Central, actually, there were many silver linings to it. Because the students, the book ban, it wasn't because of what the adults did, it was because of what the students did. They saw, we want to have exposure to these books. Obviously, not every book is for every child, and if they have their parents' permission to be able to read whatever books they wanted. And I think it empowered students to know these are books that we want to be exposed to. It made people that maybe didn't want to read a certain book, now I want to read it. And it's a very fascinating side note. We had many authors that reached out even to me personally. I think we had about 10,000 books or more that were donated that we gave out free to the community. So people that, oh, now I want to read this book. They were all free. We were at Counselor Park. We gave out all these books. And authors were calling me and saying that I wish my book had been on your banned book list because then my books would have been sold out as well. And so people found out about all of these books, and then it just encouraged them to read it. But it's the students aren't going to allow it. It's not just the adults. And I think the fact that we got national attention with our students, it shows the power of our students and their voices. And every book isn't appropriate for every student, but to have it there and have it available is very important.
So, and a little local history, since we've referenced the book ban in Central several times. I mean, according to PEN America, this was the largest book ban in the history of American public education. Delma and others made this resource list, and instead the board turned around and said, oh, we know those are about racial equality, now we know these are the ones to ban. They banned the entire list and then some, and it was over 400 books by and about people of color that were banned. We're not talking about edgy, anti-racist literature. We're talking, in some cases, but in most cases, it's like the biography of Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. getting banned, right? And they pretended it was a coincidence. That was all when they were interviewed on CNN. It was all a coincidence that it's about people of color. My organization, We Write to Node, their emails, they're talking about we banned these books because they're racist against white people for prominently featuring these black characters. That's what they said, and when they denied it was racially and politically motivated, they are egregious liars, right? And so if we let that stuff go unchecked, it has a chilling effect in the classroom. When people like this come for our books about people who don't look or act like them in our public school system, make no mistake, they're really coming for the students who don't look or act like them. And that's when we have a responsibility to say, when you come for them, we're going to be standing right here with those kids, and if necessary, we're going to be standing in front of them.
And it went as far as when we were giving out these books at Counselor Park, someone called Northern Regional Police to say that they should come and arrest us because we were distributing pornography. That's how far it went.
The biography of Rosa Parks.
Yes, and so what I say to our students that with these book bans, it shows that your voice, the word fearless now is something that I try to put for myself and for the students. You might get scared that people say these things about you, but I fought for Central, and I have this poster because I'm also a Central alum, and my alma mater, and it said, "This is not the Central that I know." And so we have to say, these aren't the school districts that we went to, this isn't how things were, and we just have to keep fighting.
Book diversity is important. It helps your students feel like they belong and that they matter. And when we're teaching, I'm a retired administrator, but I taught English, and I'm an adjunct at HAT. And so it's important that we include literature from a diverse group of authors. I graduated from York Catholic in 1989. And York Catholic High School, we didn't have an African American lit course, but I had a phenomenal teacher, Mr. Stott. And he noticed my passion for reading. And instead of going to lunch, I would go to the library. And he took me in there one day and pointed out the section of the library with all of the African American authors. And that's when I discovered the Harlem Renaissance. And I read ferociously, and it just fueled my passion, and it improved my performance in that class because I found authors who looked like me, who loved to read, who loved to write. That's important that we pass that on in education. Too often in our curriculums, we were teaching back in the 80s, Huckleberry Finn, O. Yeller, and all these folks. And then came the standardized test where people were like, well, how come scores are going up? Because y'all got the students with the diverse population reading books with characters who do not look like them. And then that's when Sharon Draper came out and was awarded the Teacher of the Year by the president at the time in her trilogy, Forged by Fire, Tears of a Tiger, Dawn Before Darkness, just encapsulated young people. And they began to find that love for reading. So whether you're a parent or an educator, it's very important that you expose young people to diverse authors, not just one group.
So I'm going to move on to the next question in a second, the last final question, but I just want to tell a story about what I recently heard. I reside in the West Shore School District. But the school board there is looking at a policy that would censor the classroom libraries. You know how all us teachers love to have our classroom libraries, and what a great resource. So they're looking at putting certain guidelines and limits to what teachers can put in their classroom library.
Boo.
Yeah, right. Well, I have a stronger word than that, but one of my friends that teaches in the district, she said to me, you know, Rich, I'm just going to pull my library. I won't have it.
Yeah.
Because the wrong book is in there, what happens? She's called out and publicly humiliated by these people. Go ahead.
There's a whole, the policies on these classroom resources, and they've been passed in Upper Adams, Bermudian, I think Southwestern, right? There've been these policies are all written by the Independence Law Center, which is a Christian nationalist organization that's trying to force the religious views into our schools. And the policy is intentionally written very vaguely. It's hard to tell. A teacher doesn't know what might be on the list, you know, so they become scared. It creates a chilling effect. So then they, like you said, they just take all their books home rather than give them out.
So I'm really short on time, and I want to respect the next panel. So I'm going to just combine our final two questions into one question because it is an important topic. School board races, and it is school board race season. So the question basically, let me roll them into one. You know, we have all this political conflict and tension. How does that affect finding people that want, good people that want to run for school board? And then how can we, all of us in this room, support those people who are running for school board? And obviously, Mike, I'm going to come to you.
Sure. Okay. Well, look, hey, in our community members stepped up big time. In 2020, they passed the biggest book ban ever. Here we are, 5 years later. Every single school board member who voted for that racist book ban is no longer on the board. We reinstated every single one of those 400 books, and then we passed a first of its kind prohibition on book bans that expressly prevents any parent from removing books or challenging books for anyone other than their own kid, right? And I think that's important. I can say, speaking in my role on the steering committee for Turn South Central PA Blue, we've seen much the same thing. I mean, we have seen an influx of highly, unthinkably qualified people who want to run for school board, a thankless and payless position, right? And so, you know, I can remember, you know, when we first started out, it was, you were having uncontested races, and now we get a flood of, 50 people applying for our strategic advice and for our resources at Turn South Central PA Blue, who are running for school board, seeking in West Shore, and Cumberland Valley, and other places that have been in the news for not so good reasons. And so we can help them with our time, our talents, and our treasure, right? We can volunteer to knock doors, make calls, send texts. We can volunteer to do graphic design, or if we're like our talents, if we have something in the field that's related, and certainly we can donate, right? Because this paid communications is extremely expensive, but also extremely effective. In Central York School District, this is a district Trump won by 20 points. I mean, we raised $190,000. We went on cable television. We did digital advertising. We sent 13 mail pieces over 2 election cycles. I mean, this is expensive. It costs money. But at the same time, we're talking about a school district, not a U.S. Senate seat. And so $25 or $50 can really go a long way. We have probably a half dozen Citizens affiliates now, right, that have branched out, so you can look for that name and pretty much know that they're pro-public ed. And if you don't have a Citizens kind of named group in your community, you can start it.
And when it comes to school district elections, or school board elections, do your research. In addition to what Mike is talking about, you have some candidates who are running with the financial support of charter schools or groups who are pro-vouchers. And their whole motive is to infiltrate the school board so that they can then come in as a group and then vote for the charters to come in. And I'm not against charters if it's a good charter, but some of these charters are for profit. Or to say, okay, now let's pass these vouchers. So do your homework, that's all I'm gonna say. And I'm specifically speaking to the York City School Board race. Do your homework and look to see which one of those candidates and who they are aligning with. It's very clear, it's not hard to find out, but do your research. If they're not pro-public education, do not vote them in.
And a great way to do that research, PSEA actually offers, through our PACE organization, schoolhouseballot.com. In any area where our school districts, our members are actually recommending school board members, they are on that. So if you go to schoolhouseballot.com, enter your address, it'll show you, are there recommended school board candidates, but also local candidates and statewide candidates as well, that are people that will support education. And again, these are people from all across the island, all across the political spectrum. There are people in all of our political parties that do stand up and go up and go to bat for public education. But the other thing I really want everyone to do is, well, by a show of hands, how many of you have ever been to a school board meeting? Oh, good. Okay. That's what I like to see. Now, take someone else with you. Get more of your community members involved. Get out there, listen to what they're saying, but also ask the questions. Ask questions of the school board members. There's public comment in every meeting, oftentimes near the beginning and at the end. Hold them accountable, but also support them when they're doing good things and tell them you say thank you as well.
Okay, so unfortunately, we don't have time for questions. We took up as much time as we possibly can.
We still have, so the food's arriving right now. We're gonna have to move things back and also ask for 1,000 apologies from Tammy over here. But yes, if there are questions from the audience,
okay.
we'll have a few minutes.
All right, cool. Go ahead, sir.
I'll be very short. This is a question as much as a comment. So when you're talking about funding for public schools coming out of Harrisburg, you're talking about the problems with them supporting vouchers, support for Moms for Liberty, the funding for school board races, dark money against people who are against book bans. All of that can be traced back to money and corruption in politics. Every single bit of it. And later this afternoon, March in Harrisburg's going to be here to talk about corruption, money, and politics that's behind all of the problems that they're talking about. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Right behind you.
So I'm going to ask a self-serving question. If you had a politician standing in front of you, what would that perfect politician look like?
We just had one who left, Carol Evans, who advocated for educational rights, left and right. She was the one who championed challenges that formula, and they finally listed. She was the one who, when we were fighting against these vouchers the last time, who we begged, and she went to the heir of Governor Shapiro and said, no, we're not doing this, and this is why. And he pulled back. So Carol Evans just left.
In my role in PSEA, I meet with legislators all across the Commonwealth, and they all look different. So it's not about how they look, it's how they act. Are they people who stand up and actually do what's right? Are they actually fighting for their constituents, or are they fighting for something different? You know, it's in the actions and not the way that someone looks. We've supported people, and I've worked with legislators who, when you see them outside of outside of the Capitol, they're, you know, I mean, I've worked with one who's a union electrician out of Philadelphia, and outside of the floor of the House, he's swearing left and right, because that's just how he was brought up and that's his life. But then you have another one who is a business owner who actually wants to make sure that he puts on a good face, so he's actually saying, this is what my business is, I want to attract people to it. It's not so much that there's one particular thing, because politicians are supposed to represent all of us, so they should look like all of us.
So you're looking for someone who just will represent the people that they're representing?
Whether they voted for him or not, because, you know, if you're elected, you're going to be representing both Republicans and Democrats as well as independents. You're going to be representing people who have money and people who don't have money. You have to take everything into account there. It's very tough to do for some people because they only know where they came from and they're not willing to listen to the people who have those different perspectives.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, sir.
More of a comment.
Eating sick.
More of a comment than a question. A lot of these attacks on public schools are faith-based, and you happen to be doing a forum in a place of worship. So there's good things for faith, and there's bad things for faith. And I come from Delaware. The schools are one of the highestly funded states in the country, and we have some of the worst underperforming schools. And my friends moved to Pennsylvania so they can have their kids educated in your public schools. So Delaware, they just are raising school and property tax because you pay a lot more when you come to Pennsylvania for your schools, but with the increase, it's catching up in Delaware. So you might see less migration into Pennsylvania. Thank you.
So I want to follow up on that, and I have an actual question related to that.
You need a speaking stick.
I do not. Related to that is with Delaware, we used to be a very heavily Democratic state, ran by Democratic politicians, and they have the worst school district. And so my follow-up, and it's kind of touched on when you're talking about both sides, is we understand diversity, but so do white nationalists and Christian nationalists. They understand that if you educate the poor, they will be able to rise up. So we have a situation of keeping the cord down by pulling books, everything, pulling funding, and it keeps happening despite having Democratic leaders. But also with tax cuts driving the economy, we also don't have the money to donate to the organizations that are helping. What do you recommend on an individual level that we can do? Like, you talked a lot about it today, but there's not a lot of specifics. It's all grand ideas, and I think a lot of politics are all about grand ideas and sound good, but we need actual goals and stuff like that. What do you recommend? Like, how do you start fighting that so that education is there?
Do you mean, I can tell you at the local level, and some people say all politics is local, right? One thing you can do, we have, PSEA has recommended candidates in 16 different school districts around this region. We have a lot. We support the people that are running those campaigns. You know what they need, though? They need volunteers. They need people to go out there and canvass. Mike, you know this was a big issue for you guys, trying to recruit volunteers, to make phone calls, to donate money. This, at the local level, you can make a very big difference, but they need all our help.
And you don't have to make a donation. I know I had pitched that pretty heavily earlier because it's what some of the orgs I'm involved in do. But we know knocking right from people have this sense canvassing is about getting into these brutal arguments with like Trump supporting lunatics on their doorstep. And they say, I don't want to canvass, someone's going to shoot me. That's not what it is, all right? You've got a curated list. You got 23% turnout in odd year elections in Pennsylvania. Your canvassing experience for school board is not going to be geared toward convincing someone for whom to vote. It's going to be geared around convincing someone to vote. It's going to be a friendly person that we know from the data science has an extremely high probability of wanting the good guy to win. You're not going to have to convince them that the pro-public ed person, that the guy who doesn't want to ban Rosa Parks, you're not going to have to plead with him or her or whomever it is answering the door. Please, we do not want to ban Rosa Parks. Oh, I don't know, maybe we ought to ban her. That's not going to be the conversation. It's going to be, did you know they're trying to ban Rosa Parks? And because your canvassing list is well designed by the people running the canvass, it's going to be a low propensity voter who only votes like 1 in 7 times, and they're going to say, I had no idea anyone was even trying to ban Rosa Parks. Of course I'll come out and vote. So you got to get out there and canvass. The canvassing operation, we know from the data science, every time you connect, 7.7% more likely to turn out and vote, and there's an additive effect, meaning if we can canvass the person 2, 3, 4 times, they're that much more likely to turn out every time, and we're convincing them to vote. We're just strategically reminding the good guys to vote. That's how we win, and it doesn't cost a cent.
We're going to give time for one more. Go ahead.
I just wanted to express some concern in regard to the special education funding. We're in a shutdown over Medicaid, essentially, and how that affects special education services. A lot of school districts are dependent upon Medicaid reimbursements for special ed services. And is there any preparation for that?
There's no preparation, like you mentioned. In my role as a previous retired assistant superintendent, when we were in those situations, we just have to get a loan. And then that loan costs interest, and now we're paying back interest on money that we already had, but we couldn't access because it wasn't given. So it's this whole cyclical effect. Kind of feel like sometimes it's a conspiracy, but you know, that's the only thing we can do. And then for those small districts, like Stilton High Spire, that really doesn't have that emergency cash fund, it becomes a real burden. And now you've got to consider cutting programs and cutting teachers. So we need a budget. So if you want to call your representatives and tell them to pass it, please do.
All right, then we give a round of applause for our panel this morning. Thank you all very much.
Also, Representative Stevens, come forward, please. You're not congressman yet, right? Which year are you? Are you 1834 or 1840? Are you 1850?
Congressman from 18, well, actually 2 periods, but my most productive was from 1858 to 1868.
We'd like you to celebrate all our panelists. We're going to recognize them all as Thaddeus Great Commoner Stevens Award recipients today. And they all get a specialized valley-colored candle. And Sherry already has one, so I don't know if I can. Oh, okay, Sherry. And is there anything you'd like to say to these champions of public education, your progeny, spiritual progeny?
Well, carry on the good fight. You know, the generations are depending on you. So, good luck. You get a different one.